Special meeting of the Board of Trustees of Kendall Independent School District to order. Today's date is January 20, 2022. First issue on it would be to call roll. Andrew Bisco.
Here.
Sean Glovier.
Here.
Debbie Villa-Gomez.
Here.
Maria Douglas.
Here.
John Clark here. Felicia Moody and Daryl Owens is out. Mr. Owens wanted to be here, but his wife has COVID, and so he didn't want to spread it to us. And I appreciate his concern for us. The first item is public comments on agenda items. All right. Next item will be discuss the scope of the Early Childhood Center. Mr. G, who's presenting?
Okay, well, I'm going to start off. We sat last week in an initial meeting, outside of our initial meeting, we sat in another meeting where we started trying to define more scope and kind of started to look at layout of spaces. And there were some things that came up in that meeting that we started realizing that, we have some more questions that we need to make sure of, and really calling this meeting and letting Josh do a presentation so that we can sit there and kind of make sure and define what exactly is we're going into this project, because they're getting to the point where they need to start having some firm deadlines and some firm ideas of where they want to go. So just wanted to run that by you so that you understand, so that we can actually really clearly define the scope for these guys to help them with what they need to do. Okay, so that, and I'll let you pick up, Josh, and pick up with your presentation so you can kind of show where we're headed right now and make sure that that's where we want to go. So.
All right, great. All right, glad to be here tonight. Thank you all for your time.
I think it's on. It's on.
So this is the floor plan that you've seen before. I wanted to show you, based on the conversations that we had on Friday with the team, there have been a few adjustments. The areas that are shaded in yellow, that is the areas that were part of the original scope. That's what you've seen before. Those are the areas that we're going to touch as part of the project. And when I say touch, that means maybe removing a demising wall between two rooms to make a larger classroom, updating the finishes, floors, paint, and creating those exhibit spaces for the interactive learning in those rooms. So that's what's highlighted in yellow. Beyond that scope, there's a light gray color in those hallways to update the finishes there, as well as the two restrooms that are serving this area. We would address ADA compliance and update the finishes in those two spaces. So that is all really contained in that one-story building. If you know the building well, that's the one-story portion of that project. We're also what we're referring to as the music gym out back, adjacent to the competition gym. We were converting that area into an interactive space, mainly to serve first grade. Because if you look at the floor plan, the main floor plan, we don't really have any scope in the two-story building. So that's the kind of teal color. There's not scope for us, however, we do have it planned for some kinder spaces to go into that building, as well as first grade, and so that's what's identified there. So the interactive learning for first grade would primarily take place in that old music gym that we would convert for that interactive learning. So that's the scope that was outlined to us. That's what we're working toward. However, in our discussions, it was making sure that we're doing everything that we need to provide the best project for the district, and maybe there's some additional items that we should consider to possibly include as part of this project. And so that's really the discussion we wanted to have to make sure that we're happy with what we're doing, primarily focusing on that one-story building for pre-K and a portion of the kinder classrooms, and really not addressing anything in the two-story or the connector between the one-story and the two-story building.
And I know that there were some questions after the last meeting about the slide and the stairwell, and looking at that is outside the scope of what they were going to be looking at doing. The other thing that contemplation, that we need to look at is that really functionally what we need in that area, or could we put that, an indoor slide somewhere else? Because that area is only going to be, really, that's a kindergarten area, and the only ones that would have access to that would be the kindergarten, not the pre-K, and they'd have to come from their areas to go up there. My idea was to sit there and use that little gym out back and create sections in there to where we create environments to where you could have, say, a mountainscape or a fort or a castle. And a part of that component would be a slide that they could come down off of, and now all grade levels could use that. And making that a very interactive area out there, you know, making, you know, a music component to it, you know, possibly an art component to it. So there's lots of potential to do out there in that little gym to where we could take and do it. But by adding a slide on the other part, that's a big add to the scope of what's going on. The other thing that we talked about was just making sure that we have enough space and to move the grade levels and fit what we have in there. And that would mean basically that they would have to sit there and address the building that out behind the cafeteria between the little gym and the main building, that room. And then also looking at that space that is the library now and looking at turning that into a classroom space as well. And then we also talked about possibly looking at the foyer, the big huge foyer where all the space is, and turning that into an open concept library, you know, in a additional optional learning space / library. And, you know, those are some of the other things that we're talking about, but that adds to the scope of it. So, and then if we're going to also do anything to the kindergarten library or classrooms upstairs, that would add to the scope. So these are the things that as district leaders that we're trying to sit there and walk through, but we're trying to guide them, but we really want to know where you guys would like to go with this and some of those considerations. So did I voice everything?
Yeah, a few things I'll add. So I do have 2 meetings tomorrow with playground reps just to start talking not only for the outdoor playscapes that are part of the project, but also to see what are the opportunities that we can have inside that interactive space, the music gym. As Mr. G explained, maybe a castle element or something really special in that area that could possibly have a slide to have that interactive area. We're looking at other opportunities for there's things that can be projected on the wall and the students can throw things at it and it interacts in that way. And so lots of ideas in that space, and the good thing is we have money budgeted as part of the project to do things in that interactive space that's in the music gym. Mr. G touched on it, but the teal areas that are highlighted within that one-story building, those are areas that are identified that we haven't taken over as part of creating a pre-K classroom or a kinder classroom. And so they're a good-sized room that we, as part of the original scope, would not be touching. So finishes and everything would stay the same. There's the opportunity there to create some collaboration spaces for teachers, possibly some collaboration areas for students. So the space is there to do some extra things in the one-story building to kind of add to the overall experience. The last thing I'll say is if we stick to the original, I just want to make sure everybody's aware, if we stick to the original plan, there's really going to be a kind of a clear divide of where we are doing work and where we're not doing work. And that's primarily going to be when you're walking into the building, you're seeing the finishes. The existing finishes are a dark brown color. We're going to be obviously updating that, painting the walls, putting new floors down in that one-story building. And so you'll see that there's 4 kinder classrooms identified in the 2-story building. Those would stay as is. Meanwhile, in the 1-story building, we've got 4 or 5 additional kinder classrooms that would be updated. Those would have murals on the walls, updated floors, walls, paint, new lighting. So there's going to be a difference between those classrooms. First grade is, like we've been planning, primarily contained in that 2-story building, like we've been talking about. So those finishes would be what's there existing, and they would get their interactive space at the music gym.
That was my first thought when I saw this too, and I was gonna go back and find my picture, but that was, because I remember from the last meeting when we saw this, thinking that the same thing, there's gonna be like this big divide when you walk in and the brand new sparkly stuff, and for some reason though, was it always were we always gonna have 4 kinder classes on the 2-story
Yes, ma'am.
side?
To get to the count that we need.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that before.
That's the 2nd floor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Educators, the benefit of having that separation between those kindergarten classes and 2 different floors? I mean, is it their benefit to have them together, closer together?
Yes, but there's not enough room.
Those are the larger,
We have 10 kindergarten classrooms right now, and we're projecting growth. We have 10 kinder and 10 first.
Yeah, and so to tag onto that, the four, you can see here, the four that are identified for kinder, those have already had a demising wall removed, so they're already large, so they're comparable in square footage to what we would be providing in the one-story building. So size-wise, kinder would be about the same for all of them, and that's why those were identified for kinder on the second floor of the two-story building.
And the idea is to have like pre-K, very open, not a whole lot of sitting at tables and desks, working, just having play, interacting to the play that they're doing. And then as they start transitioning into kindergarten, having two halves, one an interactive area and then the more traditional like tables to where they can get the work done. So they can transition back and forth between those areas. Also looking at them changing environments like the pre-K, where when you get to first grade, now it's getting more in the traditional classroom setting. So there's transitions even with that as we move along there.
So, question here, real quick. Dr. Boo, you just said there are 10 currently kindergarten classes, is that correct?
between
Yes,
both.
so last year and this year, there are 10 kindergarten classrooms.
There's only 9 on this picture, that's why.
You can see there's some on that second floor that are identified as first/K. It could be a kinder classroom,
Oh, I
they're just gonna
can't
be
see that.
smaller.
Okay, yeah. Oh, okay.
The ones to the
Alright.
left.
Yeah,
Got it, okay,
those have the flexibility of being both, they're just smaller than all the rest.
So
okay.
all the other kindergarten classrooms would be big, and then there'd be those.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Okay, well then let's.
And this is where my thought was to turn the library into another kinder classroom and turn the building, that rectangle building sitting between the gyms and the main building into another kindergarten classroom.
Wow.
So what are we gonna do, or is there gonna be a library?
you move
That's what we
to
talked
the,
about, using the foyer as an
This
open
foyer
concept
space.
library.
Okay,
So we would have to look at this foyer space and then some of these rooms that are extra within the one-story building. In order to get to the square footage that we would need to meet TEA requirements, we would have to I've done this before, you have the main, well, I've had projects where it's dispersed throughout the entire school. This, we would capture the square footage in that entryway plus some of these collaboration areas in the one-story building to get to that square footage we need.
okay.
if we, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, you go.
If we added where Mr. G was saying extra kindergarten in those spaces, is that still even enough? You don't hit your,
Adding kinder where the library is right here.
right, and then using,
Right, open
the
space.
building in the back, if you put classes there, would that hit our, would
That
that
building.
cover enough classes?
1, 2, 3, 4.
That gives us 11,
Yeah.
yes.
And that's, so, you know,
Is that
Walking.
building attached though?
No,
No,
That's
that's
all-
the old
it's
art.
portable.
it's a
building.
standalone,
Yeah, that's a portable type of,
not quite portable, but yeah, it's definitely not attached to the
Is it the
building.
old art building?
Mhm.
Okay.
Because my question would be if we, yeah, I'd like to find an alternative, because if I'm a brand new kinder parent and you're like, we get the art, and then you go in and you're like, your classroom's over here.
well, I think
I would
I
be
think the idea is
feeling
that they're
like
gonna rotate.
that's not fair.
So, the kinder,
I see Dr. Vu going, excuse me?
they're not always gonna be, like, so we have the kinder experiential classrooms in the first floor, but they would cycle through to a traditional classroom on the second floor at times, so they're all getting the experiential, opportunity.
We're working on the rotation
Okay.
schedule. There are some academic skills that kindergarten and first grade have to master. So it's gonna look a little bit different than pre-K.
Like I said, it's not gonna be the same exact environment as the pre-K, but
No, but that, so my nephew goes to Jamjuco, so I was wondering, I was gonna ask that, because I know that he rotates through different, and they have a different theme every 2 weeks. So I was gonna say, if we can't have the option to add all of that, would you at least rotate the kids so everyone's getting the same exact?
Pre-K, gender group, pre-K versus kindergarten, first grade are different. Pre-K in one half, TEKS, kindergarten has guidelines. It's just different
I understand that. I just mean from the whole, just even the experience in a classroom for a kindergartner to go in and have this bright, like murals on the wall and these experiences, and then the kids on the other half not getting that. So if we can't add in enough to the scope, then at a minimum, I would want it to at least be some type of a rotation, so all of the kids are getting the same experience.
Well, and that being said, I think the decision that we need to make, I mean, to me, we are designing a space for that group of children, and, you know, I don't know what they cost. We already have classroom sizes that are big enough on that second floor for kindergarten now. So we're talking about finishes. We're not talking about major revisions
Yeah.
and moving walls. The other 4 classrooms we have slash, you know, kinder first grade, I do think it's worthwhile thinking, well, maybe we have a movable wall, large space, small space. Again, if you need first grade class, you know, like a center wall, you partition it, it's kindergarten if needed, not, you get 2 first, I mean, those do not seem to be extraordinary expenses to consider in the scope of the project versus tearing down walls and doing things. So I'm just wondering, have we considered those options?
But if
So-
you have 2 classes in those rooms, do those collapsible walls mitigate sound enough so you can have 2 classes at the same time?
They can, if you specify the right type, they can have a high STC
I
rating.
mean, you have the solid panels that basically accordion fold.
I guess
Okay.
my concern is that those would probably end up being more expensive than maybe what you're thinking. Going into an existing building, there's structure that would have to be revised or added to accommodate the weight of those, and they are not cheap to do those
I'm-
folding partitions.
One, I asked Mr. G about, you know, the students that have special needs that are over at Patterson, where are their spaces here?
So in the
That one little
bottom,
that one little piece down here?
ECSC and the motor
That's it?
lab.
Can you point to that?
It's the
Yes.
first
Well,
row.
We only have.
Right now, we have 11.
Okay, so there's enough space to accommodate
Yes, sir.
all the grades K through one that'll be there. Well, you know,
And when I say finishes, so it's also ceilings, lighting to update. That's what we're planning in the one-story building. So when I say updating finishes throughout the rest of the building, it's more than just it's everything that you would see essentially: walls, floors, ceilings, lighting, to update that area.
And it's not even just expenses, it's the timeline and being able to finish all of the things on that side
So
to the
that's,
same.
I mean, all of, very good points. All these are, you know, being honest, if we start adding to the scope, obviously, as an architecture firm and our consultants, we've got to react to that. There's potential added time there, but the goal has always been that whatever we're doing in this 2-story building has to be done for the start of the school year, this coming school year. So the initial plan is we're issuing documents into March, and they're gonna start bidding so that we have a contractor on board and they can work over the summer. And as of right now, the only thing we're doing in that 2-story building is the secure vestibule. So that's easy, done, ready for the start of school. Finishes aren't that big of a deal, as long as I'm sure you're aware that there's material issues. We're doing our best to find materials and finishes that are readily available. So hopefully we don't run into that. Obviously I can't predict what's gonna happen whenever they actually go to purchase it. So there's a lot of things to consider on making sure that that is ready for start of school.
So I just want to clarify, Mr. Clark, one of the things that you were suggesting is the kindergarten classes that are on the right-hand side, they're in sort of like that teal color. The finishes be also done and completed in those, so that all the kinder classes, whether you're on this side or this side, are all sort of equitable and the same.
Like the hallways, like the tile, you know, the flooring in the hallways, the paint in the wall,
Right.
you know, paint in the
Right.
walls. You know, if you wanted, if we wanted to kind of match the other side, then that's
Right.
gonna add to the scope of
Right.
what's going on.
and again, maybe, we do have to look at budgets. I'm seeing what our numbers are, and it's a kick. I don't know whether it's another million, but to me, you know you're gonna have people concerned about, well, why is my child
Yes.
over here? And then say,
For
well, okay, we're
sure.
moving kids. Well, bless them, little kindergartners walking around, they're like little ducklings. You have to have, several herders and a sheepdog to keep them moving in the right direction. And so, you're moving them from one building upstairs, down a hall to the end. And to me, I think that we should endeavor to consolidate those classes closer by, one, for teacher help. Look at what COVID's doing. if we had, we have teachers out, if those classrooms are closer by, there can be some carryover and assistance. This way, it's gonna be hard to manage the staffing, it's gonna be hard for the little ones, and, and I'm looking for options, and maybe the better option is really focus on that first floor and take everything that's in there, maybe do the library piece like you want, but take that larger vestibule in the front, convert it to classrooms, really just use it for classroom space and realign the office space settings. I mean, I just am concerned that separating those kids, there's gonna be people complaining about it, even if we rotate them. Say, well, my child goes to homeroom here, and this child gets to go play before home, it's gonna be a problem. And, I just wonder what the cost is. And maybe it's one that we phase. Maybe we
I
say
think
we do
some
this.
of that can be addressed with scheduling, how the schedule works and how, they may be in 2 or 3 different environments throughout the day. I mean, that's really kind of up to the scheduling and how it's done. I don't think they have to be, I think we're getting the mindset that they're gonna be locked in that one classroom for all year long, and that's not necessarily, that's not how it's going to operate, so.
Well, I'm saying they're locked in. I'm just saying that some parents are gonna complain that why is my child, just like, why is my child in the portable? And they're over here. I mean,
Yes.
it's gonna come back at us, and I'm just saying,
Yes.
tell me the number. Then we
Yes.
make a decision that if we did some of this, here's the number,
Yeah.
and here's the scheduling problem.
Yes.
I mean, to me, if we're talking about scope,
Yes,
I'd like to see what that looks like. I'd love to see if we could do it on the first floor, so the kids are all kind of on the same floor. That doesn't look to be possible, that's a lot more expense.
yes,
So, I mean,
yes.
now, is the first floor on the stuff on the left-hand side, is that the second floor on the right-hand side?
Yes.
well, the first floor of the
It's like
old
middle.
building, the new building is on the bottom, the second floor is on the top.
I know,
It's kind of in
This-
the middle, because you have to, from that floor,
You
you
have to
have
go
to go
up.
downstairs
Yeah.
to get to the first floor, but you also have to kind of go up to get, honestly, I don't think the middle kinder I don't think those middle kinder classes are really that far away from the second floor. If you think about where, even last year at Delaney, where kinder was, and then back in, they were kind of far. I'm not quite as concerned about that, at least from a space, but I definitely want to make sure, if we're doing all of this to that building, that the kinder classes are equitable.
Yes.
They are close to that stairwell
Yeah,
at the two-story.
I'm not as,
Well, again,
I
something,
think that's why, and I suggested that today in our meeting, that
we walk it.
we need to go walk this
Yes.
building, and y'all
Yes.
need to put
Yes.
your eyes on it, because we can sit here and talk on maps all day long.
Yes.
But until you go, especially like that
Yeah.
gym in the back where, with the creative spaces and all stuff, and interaction that we're talking about back there, until you actually see the space that we are talking about, and can start seeing what the talking, we can sit there and beat it up on a map all day long, because it's
Yeah.
space, and,
Right.
we did this the other day, and we were sitting here for, 3 or 4 hours, beating it up on a map, looking at different alternatives and things, but the reality is, we need to go talk and walk it and look at it. So I would like to do that sometime next week before our next board meeting, so, are y'all available like either Monday night or Tuesday night, or
Yeah.
possibly go do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, because I'm having a hard time envisioning this library in the foyer. And the location of the classrooms is one thing, but I totally agree with what Mr. Clark was saying. It's not even just gonna be parents sort of upset. It's gonna really, to me, boil down to equitable access, because this environment and these classrooms, we're doing them for a reason. And I know they're gonna be experiential and all that kind of stuff, but you can't say that this old environment is gonna be equitable to this new environment. There is a reason why we're doing the new environment, to take that education to a different level. So I think, like Mr. Clark said, what is the cost to make at least all the kinders equitable with finishes, whatever we need to do, so that everyone in kinder is getting same sort of experience.
the other thing is, the starting point, as far as money-wise, is the 2.8.
Yes, sir.
What does X amount of dollars get me beyond that?
Right.
And am I willing to say, $500,000 more and I get what I want? Is it worth it to see that? But if I don't know what $500,000 will get me, I'm not just gonna hand it to you.
Right.
All this extra scope here, the green that we're saying is potential, that is green, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. What does that cost? So I haven't heard that, and I wrote it down actually, that I was a little concerned. That's the one thing we haven't heard.
Right, so to update, I have a number to update finishes throughout the rest of the building, so beyond the yellow areas. And like I said, that's floors, walls, ceilings, lighting, our estimate is 600,000 to do that. So that would bring everything up to the same standard of what we're providing everywhere else. That does not include updating finishes within the restrooms that are in that two-story building or any other restroom that's not the two that are in this primary pre-K area. That, that number is around 500,000. But we could look at, the good thing about those is they're newer. So we're probably
500,000 on
not,
top of the 600?
yes, sir.
For bathrooms,
Just for the
So-
bathroom.
on the second floor.
Well, those, and then there's some in this one-story building that we haven't touched either.
So how many bathrooms would that be?
1, 2, 3, 3 groups of restrooms, male, female. The good thing about, granted, I haven't checked it, but this is a newer building, so we probably aren't dealing with some of the ADA issues that we're dealing with in the one-story building. So relocating plumbing gets expensive. That would help us in the two-story building. So we would primarily focus on updating finishes. Do we have to? No. It could stay, the restrooms could stay as they are, as long as they're ADA compliant. We can verify that. So that kind of covers finishes throughout the rest of the building.
We also hadn't heard, at the last meeting, what that timeline would look like for that side that you're predicting.
So from our end, we would need probably another couple of months to get that additional scope rolled into our project. So we're gonna have to talk through that and see what we can do to still try to meet the time frame of getting in there in August. I can't answer that exactly right now until I know exactly what we're doing, and then I can start diving into our schedule more and talk with the district and see how we can possibly accommodate. But we would need to extend it a little bit because we're already at the end of January. We're signing in March. That sounds like a lot of time, but it's gonna go by fast. And so it's diverting, all of our attention is in this one-story building right now. And now I'm having to spread it out amongst the entire building potentially. So there's consultants that are affected. And so we'll have to talk through that. I don't know exactly what it looks like right now, but there's gonna be some additional time that we would need to wrap up our side. It would delay bidding, getting the documents out.
I guess I'm curious if because I know the goal for sure is pre-K kinder for August. And once that goal is done and we move into the second half of the building, and it's gonna be a few months, would that be working during school? Would that be trying to?
So, let me know if this answers your question. So we would start, the two-story building would still be the focus to get as far along as we can
Right.
before school starts. And the contractor would know that day one. So that's what they would focus on. Hopefully they can knock out, we are only talking about finishes. Like I said, as long as they're readily available, if they have the right amount of crew, maybe that's possible, but I can't speak for them. But yes, at some point, there's gonna be, students pre-KK in the two-story building while we're working on the one-story building, because the overall scope most likely can't be done before the start of school.
Right.
It's gonna drag into probably December for a mid-year, possibly spring break switch, where now this is a complete campus.
Right, okay. Well, and from what I understand, the goal is to not even have first grade there for next year anyway, but it would be those kinder classes that would be affected. I was just curious.
Another concept would be to sit there and possibly do this in phases.
Right.
It doesn't have to all try to be done at one time to phase different aspects of it into play.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, that's a good point. We could continue to focus on what we're focusing on, get that done, move in, and I mean, honestly, as soon as we wrap up, we roll into what is phase 2 to address maybe two-story building or however that may need to work out to give you the spaces that you need when you need it.
Okay.
Or I guess, yeah. We'd have to look at it, and the tricky side from us is that we've been focused on this one-story building. And now if we start to switch, because the two-story is the priority, we're behind. And so we would need to figure out how to address that.
And I envisioned us getting all of it on that first floor. I envisioned it all being the one story. I'm now seeing it saying,
It's not
you know,
possible.
that now we're having to branch out. And I understand it's, when you stack it on top, it's not far from the other building. It's going up a set of stairs. It's
Yeah,
not
I
far.
have it just slid up above.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, you
It's-
stack them, it isn't far, but
Right.
it's still down a hallway, which is okay. But again, kids are gonna walk from a bright environment into a
Yes.
darker environment, and they're going, what's going on? You know, why am I
Yes.
being punished?
Yes.
You know, who knows what they'll
Yes.
think? And I,
Not the kids, the parents.
well, yeah, and you know, yes, a teacher, doing all that's a need. I understand that. We have to distinguish between a need and a want. You know, I want the kids to have the best experience. My need is gonna be controlled by my funds. So that's kind of where I am. But I do think that if we can, that's an important priority. I also think that having the right environment between the buildings is an important want, not a need yet. But because we do have a library, we don't have to change anything, but maybe that's another phase. Those are all cost estimates. When we talked about a lot of things that need to happen, we talked about, you know, maybe we're gonna have to bite the bullet, talk about a bond, you know?
So I do want to, it was brought up in the community meeting, I want to make sure it's discussed here as well, that one-story building is not sprinklered right now.
That's an-
Per
It's not
code,
what? I'm sorry.
Not sprinkled.
It's
not
Not
sprinkled. Per code and our understanding of the code is, when a project reaches over 50% of the square
Yeah.
footage area affected, then you have to sprinkler it.
Right.
Right now, with the yellow areas, we don't meet that. However, the fire marshal could overrule our interpretation. I'm working on getting a meeting set up with him to talk through that. If we start, what I don't want to happen is, if we do phases, we focus on this and we don't sprinkler it, and he agrees to that, we start doing scope in the two-story building, he says, okay, no, now you do, and we're tearing out things that we just put in, and it's wasting your money. So, that estimate is around 200,000 to sprinkler that one-story building, plus the music gym. And like I said, I'll have that discussion with him and see what his thoughts are on how it is now with the scope that we know for sure, and then if we start doing phases, what does that look like?
And where, the proximity of that to the fire department, the fire department's right down the street, so I mean, you know, I've had this conversation, you know, is it fire suppression or is it, you know, a safety? And, you know, fire sprinkler systems aren't a life-saving method, they're fire suppression systems. And when the fire department's right down the street, how much does that really play into it?
I
So-
agree with that statement, but we also lost a building 18 years ago to a fire, so, and they were right down the street from the same fire department, so.
I'm not sure
I
that
can
we.
see both sides of that.
And the other
Yeah.
aspect of this is that this area is made out of concrete.
That's
so
what I was gonna
That's
say.
the other part of it.
Maybe that will help our case, that there's a lot of concrete walls in that building. Maybe he'll be okay with that. I'm dealing with a different project with the fire marshal, and I have the code, and I'm discussing the code, and it doesn't matter. He's the authority having jurisdiction, and he can overrule that. So that's why I'm trying to get that meeting for next week, so I have that information when I come back to the board meeting next week, and be able to inform you on that, how that discussion goes.
But we are also making an investment here, and, you know, a suppression system, maybe we should call it that, is an investment in
Investment.
protecting it. If you have it, I believe our insurance rates would hopefully be a little better, not kill us as much. I mean, I don't know that we necessarily take something that is probably more a need than a want, I mean, to protect it. Now, again, if we have one occasion where we have a fire in one of those classrooms, are we gonna spend the $200,000 now coming in renovating all the things we have to do? You know, we're gonna damage it when we pour the sprinklers on them. I mean, that's the other problem, we're gonna damage it,
Yeah.
but either way, they'll get damaged. It's a question of how much.
I guess, you know, this fire marshal could be gone next month, a new one come in and have a different opinion, and I guess I don't want to run into a situation where we're doing this in phases, and they decide at some point, yep, you gotta go back, and then ceilings would have to come out, we're replacing ceilings that we just put in not that long ago, so trying to avoid that if we can. If we can't afford it and he's agreeable, I understand, I just wanna make sure y'all are aware.
My understanding from my prior involvement with the city, even if you phase it, I mean, I think the city's gonna say, it's technically one project,
Yeah,
and it's over that space, and you're gonna need to sprinkle it all.
that's how I anticipate the conversation go too, but I'm definitely gonna go in there with the code knowledge that I have and see how the conversation will go.
And I think it is a good conversation to even get more information on, because, I mean, I'm hearing the whole thought process, both sides, but there is a reason why it's current code. And the reason for the current code is not just property, but safety as well. So again, will we be remiss 5 years from now that we didn't do it when we're touching the building with almost $3 million worth of renovations, but yet we didn't put in a fire suppression system? Just because we were technically able, because we touched 49% versus 50%. So is that really the rationale we want to go with? Or again, what is the cost involved to really kind of do it right? And what is the balance between,
I mean, they're gonna have to show us, because you could have one system where the lines are charged all the time with sufficient pressure, and that's all plumbing now. That's one cost. You have systems where they're not charged. The fire department comes in, screws their hose on and charges the water in it. Then the ones that are charged all the time, we gotta deal with freezing, because that's what happens on the line. So, and they have systems that are charged with other chemicals other than water while they're static, and then the water flows afterward. We just gotta get the number. I think it's,
right,
coming in and retrofitting, would be a nightmare.
yes, yes, that's why I think it's wise to have all the information up front and make a very concerted decision, because again, I don't want to just be technicality, we touched 49%, so we got away with doing it, when maybe it's not the best decision.
Can we go back to your suggestion, Mr. G, that came up about, the library and the foyer? Is that only to, like, have a transition space, or is that to be able to put a kinder class there?
Well, it's more to have just another educational opportunity, and off the backside of that building, Josh, you have the cursor, can you show on the side of the library where it is right now, that open area out there that overlooks, there's a tiered area, that could be an outdoor learning area also that comes off of that library, so you've got that foyer that works right through there. There's all kinds of potential to where you can have all kinds of open learning spaces.
Would that, okay, so it would just be open, the library?
Well, the library would be an open, that open concept library with just flexible seating and just kind of a cool area. And then outside, you'd have more, we were talking earlier as we were walking through, I can come up with all kinds of ideas. And, I drive him crazy. But
All it takes is money.
the reality is that you could put like an amphitheater out there, or something,
Nice.
build one and that becomes an outdoor classroom.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of things that would come off of that whole, and basically that would be it'd be like you're walking into a library instead of walking into a school, and it just becomes a much more inviting learning environment. And
Do you remember the presentations we had? One of the brought-in showed, they had like multi-levels. They were, you had staircase, but they also separated almost by,
Yeah.
a section that they could see. To me, again, we're talking about a building, and, there's some benefit to that, to the first graders, we're focused
Oh,
on
yeah.
pre and K. There's certainly benefit to the little ones to use it. To me, that's something that connects those spaces, even though we aren't making major improvements in all of them.
No,
So-
that's why I'm asking, because I like the idea, but I didn't know if it was only being brought up, if we were trying to find spots to move around kinder,
So
or
think
we're
about
just
when you
trying
walk
to use the
in,
open space
And you
when
got
you
the
walk in.
secure vestibule off to the right, and as parents walk in, the first thing they're gonna see when they come in is that open concept
Yeah,
library
it's-
area, so.
Yeah,
those-
I remember that. Yeah, I like it.
That's
I want to keep it on the table if it's an option, not only if we're just trying to shuffle around kinder classes. My other question was, where did the specials classes go that were on the map?
So that's
The EEC, that's what I was asking.
the
They're down the coast of-
ECSC and Motor Lab. So we moved some things around after our conversation last week to put the Motor Lab closer to the ECSC and move the pre-K room over. So this central area, there's already plumbing in this area.
So that's gonna be art and music
No,
and,
oh, I'm
I'm talking about
sorry.
specials
I'm
classes.
sorry.
Yeah, I was
no,
like, I think that was a different,
I
yeah,
apologize.
sorry. Before I thought they were labeled specials on the map at one point.
And this is where we were talking about that small gym in the back,
Yeah, okay,
incorporating specials into
just a
the
big open
environments out
space.
there. And so that becomes basically, instead of having a designated classroom space for it.
It's just
Now, they're cycling through, almost like centers inside that gym, so they're rotating through centers possibly, as opposed to sitting there and having to go to a fixed area for art. They're also, with what we're talking about doing with the way it's gonna be designed, you can incorporate art into their lessons every day, and where it's being done in the classroom environment and.
Yeah,
not
I'm
necessarily
just trying to
in-
understand, because I know before it was on there, so I'm just making sure, okay.
Do we have any security concerns?
Security concerns?
Yes, as far as the building, or has anybody mentioned anything that they would like or dislike about what your design is so far?
So the doors that are in this one-story building along the perimeter are a lot of glass, and so we're gonna replace those so it doesn't look quite as inviting. There's also a lot of windows along there, and so we're talking through putting a film on those windows so that it still lets the light in, but nobody necessarily can walk up and see directly into a pre-K classroom. Beyond that, once we start getting the playgrounds laid out on the backside, we'll look at how the fencing layout should best be laid out around those new structures to create that secure area. As well as once that drive, we get the layout worked out for the back drive, how the fences back there need to be laid out as well. And then adding the secure vestibule at the front of the building, so that's in this area right here.
Okay, and is that gonna be half glass?
The secure vestibule.
Yeah,
So initially, we were just gonna put a typical partition wall on the left side and then new doors beyond. If we're talking about this library concept, we may want to introduce some glass so that we have that visibility to that kind of special library area off to the left, rather than just having a wall there. And then we need to make some modifications to the existing glass that's at the office to get that entrance in.
okay, and that's already within the scope of what we're.
Yes, sir, that secure vestibule is already part of the scope.
Is the white space, is the cafeteria and the offices right there, is anything being done to that?
So not as part of what we were initially pursuing. If we start talking about finishes in that number that I provided you, that would include updating finishes within that space.
Okay.
So it's to capture the rest of the building, so everywhere you walk in this building is equal,
Yeah.
finish-wise. Not, obviously competition gym is but it's the main
Right.
one-story, two-story building to get that up to speed.
Right.
So when you're walking around, it feels like
The same.
Same
this is all
building,
yeah.
consistent, right?
Yeah.
Great.
We've tossed around, it would be nice to do some things on the exterior. I know that's additional money, but that's maybe a later phase also to
Yeah,
do some things on the exterior.
Not
But
priority.
to focus on interior, that would
Yeah.
get everything up to speed.
So, under this plan, can you cursor to the main entrances that we would be using to get these kids in and out generally?
So this would be a main entrance. Once my civil engineer is doing a traffic study of the site, and then we'll sit down and have a discussion about where is it best to drop off first, kinder, pre-K, because we will have that additional drive at the back. So this is the main entrance for visitors, but students could also come in that way if we're using this as a drop-off. We have the side drop-off here to the left, and so this, while it's not a primary entrance, would probably be used for those students to come in that way also. With the drive going in at the backside, this entrance directly here would probably become another entrance for students to come in, since it's a direct, probably a straight shot out to that new drive at the back.
But you don't have anything as far as cover, and that is quite a walk for some child by themselves, without wandering off the path.
I mean, but the only grid to even think about could be maybe first grade, I mean, and bus delivery perhaps
Yeah.
on that
And
side.
so far, bus deliveries over on the left-hand side.
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
I've
so
got
we're-
some ideas on, I've been looking at this as far as what we can do and when we talk with the engineer. But basically, when you got the back one, you'd basically bring them in, you'd have a covered area off the back of the gym. That would be one drop-off area. You'd have a staging area for your kids inside that main gym. We've got the smaller little gym, that could also be a staging area for your pre-K kids, which you'll have less numbers of, so then they would be, in that area. and then you'd have your first grade that could be coming in off of this far end down here where they come in right now, you know, on the first grade hall. So your first graders come to their classrooms, your kindergartners go to the gym, your pre-K goes to the, you know, there's, in that way, you've got 3 different traffic flows going around it. That's why I said we gotta sit down and make sure that that's feasible with the engineer and work through it. But as far as staging kids in the morning and getting them, you know, and the teachers being able to pick them up, that would be a perfect scenario right there. But, you know, because the teachers would be, first grade teachers could be in their classrooms, kinder would be out in the gym picking up hinder, and then the pre-K would be picking up their kids. If they come through, and they can go pick up their breakfast in the morning, go to the ones that eat, go into the cafeteria, you know, and then they can pick them up on the way back to their classes. So, like I said, that's just some thoughts, but we're gonna have to work through the traffic flow and pattern and make sure that all that
And
works.
having been a crossing guard, parking attendant,
Fired.
fired, yes, formerly exercising that responsibility. You know, inclement weather creates nightmares for traffic because mamas don't want to let their kid out without the umbrella. They gotta get out of their car, they gotta walk around. You know, if, at least can we put together a cost estimate, if we put some sort of cover extending from the main entrance that's far enough to pick up a car, the passenger side of the car.
So the main entrance being the secure vestibule entrance.
You know,
out.
that's where mama's gonna drop off their pre-Ks. They're not gonna go, they're gonna drop off there. That's gonna be their place to say their goodbyes every day.
Or on the side, that side.
Perhaps even then, we gotta talk about some sort of, I'm just telling you, traffic that flows
Yes.
badly, even on a good day, flows even more badly, good English, you know,
So-
when it rains.
I'll put together a cost estimate for kind of each of the drop-off areas,
I mean,
you know,
even as a-
back, left.
Yeah, even as a cantilevered structure that does not attach, but, you know, something that spreads out to provide a little bit of protection. Because one, the mamas don't have to get out then. Teacher's there, open the door, they take their baby out, mom can stay in the car and move, because you're gonna back up. You know, if you have, how many KA and pre-K do you expect to have?
Right now, we have 5 classrooms,
How many students?
80-ish.
Okay. 80 now?
And
the
rolling.
last number I saw.
The good thing about that also, yes, it's a protection, but when you walk into the building right now, it's a little bit confusing about, I know it says main entrance or, you know, but it's a little bit confusing with the other set of doors that would kind of more identify that this is where you enter.
I'm just thinking, because we don't have good traffic flow around there, and it's gonna be difficult, and everything we can do to keep it moving in the mornings will benefit the neighborhood, because they're stuck in their houses when we got our kids coming in and out, so.
Understand?
At least give me an idea what that costs, just having
Yes, sir.
got yelled at some mornings, because I'm trying to make them move, you know, so.
Yes, sir.
appreciate
I can do that.
Can you tell me again the cost? It was 500K to do just the finishes, 600K to do the finishes with the bathroom?
No,
No,
No.
600K to do the finishes, 500K
And
to
additional
do the
bathrooms.
bathroom,
Just
just
for the bathrooms.
3 groups of bathrooms.
Okay,
And then
plus.
200K
1.1 total.
to sprinkler the building.
Yeah,
Correct?
230 is what we're estimating for the sprinkler.
230?
Yes, ma'am.
230, okay.
and is that for the whole building?
Sprinkler?
Yep.
The one-story building that's not sprinkler, the 2-story already is.
Okay, 2
And
stories
then
on.
the music gym
Okay.
out back. So
Alright.
basically where our scope is contained right now. The fire marshal may allow us to not sprinkler that gym, but I'll hopefully know more next week and can share that with you.
I wouldn't hold my breath.
Okay, so, we asked questions, they're good, so you kind of understand why we feel like we needed to have this meeting and
Yes.
try to get through and help these guys get further into the project. And the other aspect of it is that we want to have a product that, you know, is gonna be representative of what we want, what we're looking for. And
Sure.
so, you know, I don't want to sit there and, you know, just go into it without thinking through everything.
Yes.
Okay, and these guys have got to get rolling, and I keep saying, you know, tick-tock, but I mean, if we add to the scope, then that's gonna sit there and add to the timeline and the constraints that we're under. Also, from our planning, and as a district, it's gonna be, you know, we're gonna have to work in unison to sit there and get things situated and moving along where we need them to go. So, you know, there's nothing as an action item tonight, but, you know, at the meeting after, next Thursday, we can sit there and create it if you wanna sit there and discuss it then we can put it on the agenda to sit there and
So are we gonna walk through the building
I'm
next
sorry,
Monday?
I'd
Say
like to
Monday?
walk through it,
Okay.
and that's what I was looking at my calendar just now, is to see,
Mm,
either Tuesday night or Wednesday night, which one works
Good.
best for y'all.
Somebody available?
As far as I can tell, I'm available Tuesday. I think the sooner the better.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Tuesday would be
I think
good, and that gives you
Tuesday.
some more time to kind of rattle around and think through
Yes.
some stuff, and then we,
Come back
Let's do
Thursday.
Tuesday.
Thursday.
So for the board meeting on Thursday, depending on what comes from that walk, if I receive information as far as a direction or not, the presentation will probably be reflective of what you're seeing here, just because of the time constraint, but there will be some updates. We're having meetings next week regarding graphics and themes for the rooms, and so we'll have that information and update to share with you. So just want to make sure, and then can always come back and give you an update as far as how we're going to progress with the project, schedule, budget, all that information.
Perfect.
Any other questions for Josh?
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, do y'all want to know the cost of the slide? Do you have?
Yes.
Oh, I thought that was in the interactive space and was already included, but.
Yes, well, that's,
So if
If
you're
it
not,
go- if it goes in
there's
interactive-
more.
if it goes in the interactive space, then there's already a budget for doing that interactive area. To do, so it's a large number, but it's primarily because we've got to create that opening from first to second floor, and so we're involving structure. So our estimate is about 200,000 to modify the structure, create that opening, get the slide properly supported.
One time.
But I'll also point out, we would be eating into valuable classroom space for first or kinder classrooms that we're taking over square footage that could be used as a classroom to make that happen.
Yeah.
So,
You know, and again, if we were willing to consider that, I think that might be better spent in that space between the buildings, making that more attractive and usable, you know, so that kids, I mean, I think kids come in there, if they have a beautiful space up or down, they're gonna say, that's great, you know, and teachers won't be worried about them falling out of the slide on the way down, and, you know, maybe, they're worried about them falling down the stairs, I know, but,
Yeah.
yeah, it just seems to me with that kind of price, you know, let's look at making that space in between, you know, a neat library and something that all of them feel like.
Well, even just the
Digital.
kinder classes, you know, the same and all of that.
Yeah.
Because we keep talking about what the kids and what the parents might think, but even the teachers, like who draws the short straw to end up over there? That's gonna be an issue too.
You're
No
gonna have
comment,
one
no-
side of the
no
building
comment.
that's brand spanking new, and the other side is gonna be a cave, and that's how that building's always been.
Yeah.
Because it remodeled while I was there, I'm just saying. So-
I like the idea of the slide going in as an alternative to the interactive space, so that was a good compromise, whoever thought of that.
I'm okay with that.
yeah, we have put a slide in a project before, and later talking to the teachers, it's a logistic nightmare for
Nightmare?
them,
Yeah.
monitoring up and lower, and then there are some students who can't go down the slide, and so then you've got that kind of, issue to deal with to try to create that equity, so
So the
just some
fi-
things to consider.
The fireman pole was out, right? Clear the air on that?
It would probably be cheaper,
For the
but
teachers, that's the one thing.
Yeah.
Just saying, work for the Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
thank y'all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
What time Tuesday?
Tuesday, what time you wanna try?
5:30, 6 o'clock.
Will we interfere in anything going on in the building in terms of, is there any,
Say somebody needs to check Arthur's schedule to make sure there's not anything going on that night.
yeah, why don't we check and try to work, if there's something like they've got basketball games or something
They're
happening or
not,
football.
what they're gonna have,
They don't play
they have
basketball.
rehearsal for the musical,
Okay.
but that's back
Mr.
in
Clerk.
the,
Okay,
If we're all gonna be up there at the same time, we need to post that.
it
don't
needs to
we?
be
Okay.
posted,
Just
so we gotta give,
wanna
I
make
mean, we
sure.
gotta give Tracy posting tomorrow for a Tuesday
All right,
possible meeting, you know, call it whatever you wanna call it. The other thing that I'm gonna ask Mr. G to do, we're talking about money, and we're planning to dip into fund balance, and you've seen Mr. Adams' report. You know, as a board, we probably need to also think about those who come after us, that if we spend all the money and hamstring those who are after us, it's not the best plan. There are a lot of things that I think the district wants to address, and I think some of those are needs to address probably. I'm gonna ask Mr. G to get Mr. Adams on, I see him right there, to kind of put together, if we're talking about, we gotta still fix this roof, and we still gotta do this, and we gotta do these things, giving us some cost estimates to look at it, because, you know, we may have to try to sell the fact that the public needs to support this, because we've been reducing our bonds. You know, if we can stay and show we've reduced bond debt by this much, and we're gonna incur this much, and it extends the payout perhaps, but, you know, again, I'm one of 8 kids, and, it was one thing to have, boys and girls sleeping in the same room, you can manage when you're up to maybe 5 or 6, but when you got to be teenagers, you gotta have your own bedroom. We're at that point with, if we're facing these issues, that maybe we gotta recognize this is more of a need than a want anymore. And I think we need to look at kind of what those numbers look like to recognize we can spend this far in fund balance, but we gotta start talking about how we recoup it, or how we keep a fund balance for those who come after us, and operating our budget.
And I'll add on, we have touched on a lot of projects so far. I mean, I think I gave you a summary list of, all the projects that we've already touched on, and we've gone into fund balance, and we've used, regular budget to sit there and address some of those things with our maintenance budget. But the reality is, we can't keep doing that, and we've been able to sit there and spend some down, add some back into the fund balance, but you can't always bank on the fact that you're gonna be able to sit there and add to your fund balance. But if you start bringing it down, like and when you're trying to touch a lot of projects, and we do have a lot of projects, because, I think everybody here owns their own home, it's maintenance, and maintenance takes time, and it takes money and resources, and so there's always gonna be that component to it, and we've got some buildings that are getting older, and the last time we went to a bond was, I believe, in 2008, so, 2004 is what I'm doing from now, so we're looking at the dates today. That's 26 years ago. I didn't do the math very well there, but
Oh,
18.
18 years ago.
18 years there, yeah, so, and then,
Our seniors were just
sorry,
born when that
back up.
happened.
I think they're set to be paid off in 2030, and that was where I was coming up with the other number, sorry, because I looked at that earlier today. But the reality is that we're looking at being, debt-free with what we've been doing, with being able to call bonds in 2027. That's much faster than what it was supposed to have been. And so we have been very dutiful about paying off and using the surpluses with the INS fund to be able to do that. And, there are a lot of projects that we're gonna have to sit there and as a group, come to a decision, what do we need to address? And, we still have other roofs, we fixed 3 roofs, but we still have other roofs that have issues. We have, playground, playscape issues, we have things that we have to sit there and work on there. So it's just gonna be those things where we're gonna have to really consider and prioritize, but we can't keep going to fund balance to do it all. We can do some of the projects, but we can't do them all.
Chad and I were at a meeting at the city on Tuesday, and they were talking at the city going to hire bond counsel. So they're apparently having a discussion about a bond within the city. That might give us some idea of the temperament of the population, seeing how that goes. I think people, who have kids in school are more prone to support a bond for their kids. People who don't have kids say, I already paid my fair share, I don't want to pay any more. But, again, for all these projects, we're talking about, Playscape needing to move it to Delaney. We have 5th graders on those campuses. Is the current play areas sufficient for a 5th grader compared to a 3rd grader? I don't know. Those are things we really got to look at, because long-term, I think we're trying to save taxpayers' money by not saying, okay, we're going to build new buildings.
Right.
We're doing like a responsible homeowner, what I'm adding on, I make it work, and I think we've done a good job of that. But I do think we need to recognize that fund balance only goes so far, and at some point in time, we have to stop. And I'd hate for another board 5 years down the road to say, we have this and we have no balance to work with, or that we can touch.
I just had a thought when you said that. I wonder if, could they move from Arthur, those Gaga ball pits, could you move it to the elementary? Yeah.
If they're in good enough shape to move, I don't know how long they've been out there. If they start getting weathered, I don't know how much.
I just figured you may as well repurpose it and put it at the elementaries, because the 5th graders love those.
Anything we can do to, save money for building and just talk about we refurbish, certainly we're saving money. Now, again, it may cost millions of dollars to
Yeah.
tear it apart and move it.
If there's more than one, you could move one to each elementary.
I think those are things we gotta address, so that's what I asked, staff to come back with us and say, okay, this is your list of projects, generally it's gonna cost this much. And we have to recognize, okay, are we willing to ask the public, will you support a $4 million bond, with our current, bond indebtedness, it's, we at least have to address it.
And, I'd ask Robert to come because they're moving the 6th grade to the junior high. There's gonna be some costs associated with the junior high as well. And you know, there's gonna be some things that we're gonna have to touch on there as well to get it ready for the sixth grade to go there next year. So you wanna kinda go over, do you have that or no?
Surprise.
Okay. So I would say that with those, we're looking at about $500,000 to sit there and make some modifications to the junior high school, to sit there and make it a better space for the sixth grade to go there.
To
So-
clarify, is that the 551 that I see in this letter from Mr. Adams?
I'm sorry?
Is that the 551 in this letter from Mr. Adams?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
It is, okay, all right.
And what kind of modifications or accommodations are we thinking there?
Basically taking down some walls to sit there and create a special education, better special education environment, refurbishing the old gym area for the sixth grade as they come in for their pre-athletics, you know, painting, you know, there's always paint, flooring, toilets, you know, fixing the bathrooms, getting more bathroom space. There are some bathrooms in the teacher's lounge that are basically big enough to sit there and create more restrooms for students, but right now there's not door access to it, and there's gonna be some modifications that have to be done to that. So that's a big part of the expense.
What
And
about-
then the other one is the old band hall that's now serving as a choir area, turning it into more kind of like a multi-purpose room like we did at the high school, and then opening up some of the spaces off of that room to create specials classrooms and intervention classrooms.
Now, I'd heard something about the girls needing more weights, a weight room over at that's junior high, because they really didn't have a weight room type of thing.
They have a weight room, so I don't know where you're hearing that.
How
Where's
much,
the
how
weight
much?
room? It's up front, right?
We moved it up front to move them in the building. They were in a portable before, so we actually created and built a weight room up front for them to actually be in the building, you know, where their dressing rooms and all that were, instead of being out in the portable area. So,
I think I've seen that area up front, but is that really an equitable space to what the boys have access to?
well, the boys use their locker room area. They have one in their locker room area, so, I mean, it's out in the field house. So, I mean, the girls don't have their own field house, so is that equitable, you know? I don't think it is, so. As far as the place we created for them, I think it's very equitable. I mean, there's more than enough room for them to sit there with the weights that they use, so. Yeah.
Well, I think you kind of contradicted yourself, because you said the boys have an entire field house, the girls have a certain, small little section.
Well, they
So-
have, their locker rooms are in the main building. They don't have a complete separate area. And then when
Right.
you shift to basketball, the boys that go to basketball go into into the gym, but the weight room's still out in the locker room. So we don't have a separate, you know, field house for the girls.
Right, so it's not equitable, they do have a
Well, I
space,
mean,
but
I don't
it's,
know that many schools are gonna have that, you know, where,
Well, I mean, I think we have to look at the needs and say if we're not meeting their needs, and that's what we have to look at. But again, these are the projects that we're talking about that we need to figure out what we're gonna do to accomplish it. That's why I think a list of what they are, and then, you know, the problem is the current bonding mechanism, you have to put each item that you're wanting to use the money on, and they get to vote up or down on it. And you have to do it in November, so it's with a general election, so you tend to have a bigger turnout. So, my concern is if you look at the bonds that were sent out this last November election, almost all the athletic facilities were defeated. They voted for some other things, but those who didn't pass, they were all primarily, no more on the gym, no more here, they wanted it spent on other spaces. So-
I agree with that, I think it's just something that we need to be cognizant of, that, lawsuits have been done about inequitability between girls and boys' sports facilities and access, and so I'm not saying it's a priority, it's not currently in the scope, but I do think it's just something to acknowledge that at the junior high, those spaces are probably not equitable at this time.
And more than anything else, is there a need for it? If there's not a need to have deadlifts and all that kind of stuff in 18 stations, that's because you don't have that many
No,
girls that are doing that, fine. But just like what was it, last year, the NCAA, you've got one stack of weights for, 14 teams at one facility. And then you go over to the boys' side, and for 14 teams, they got a whole weight room with, several racks. So it's just, for me, it's a matter of, is there any additional things that we could do for them? And like I said, it's not currently on the scope, but let's keep it at the forefront that we're gonna do the best we can to make sure it's equal or give them the opportunities to have the things that they need. So that's the only point I'm looking at.
And as a board, I think we should be cautious of how we say things are equitable or inequitable. I mean, I think we just need to be cautious of using those terms, just because, you know, I don't know what the equity evaluation is yet.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful saying, I don't think it's equitable. I think we need to have the evaluation, say,
And
does it meet needs, you know?
a field house with 100 football players versus a space where there's 30 girls.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, same does not necessarily mean equitable.
Right.
So you could still have equitability without having the exact same.
Right, and again, depends on the, you know, on the participants, you know, if, you know, you can get off on discussions that are way more than we're posted for tonight, so we gotta be careful we don't go too far.
So just something to keep in mind.
Yes, I agree.
So,
So real quick, before we adjourn, back to what we're here for. Sorry, I have sometimes get a crack the whip. On this letter, Mr. Adams gave us, it says that, what we're looking at is 2.8 from y'all, right? 2.8 million?
For the
That's
base scope.
for the base scope, that's what's in here.
Right.
So just keep in mind that all of these things are not including 600 for the bringing everything to the finish, and then the bathrooms for $500,000, and the 230 sprinklers.
Right.
None of that is covered in the numbers presented here. So
Correct.
just, I was just looking over this, and I just
on
want to
the
make sure that
slide.
we were, that slide is included in the interactive space. We got that clear, okay?
and
Okay.
again, I think Mr. Adams would probably do a little more explanation to us about the opportunities for funding these through alternative methods, and look at that. I mean, the idea that, like I said, he's showed us the opportunity to use a, you know, a tax maintenance note. It affects our operating budgets, but if we eventually do bond, it can be brought back. So I think we need to hear
I
about
just
that.
want us to all be cognizant
Oh,
of
right,
it, that's all.
it's a lot more than
That's all.
2.7 million, that was the
Yeah.
question.
Just, yeah.
But like I said, we have one chance to do it right. Let's get to 90%, you know, I mean, let's get to 90% of what's right. If funding affects the other 10%, then we have to be cognizant and say, okay, that's one of those projects that we'll add in when we can get there.
That's fair.
But we gotta get what works for these students and their teachers. I mean, to me, that's the key, and
And we need to do it now.
I.
Part of it we need to do now.
I mean,
As much as
Yesterday.
possible so we can open on August 1st.
Again, we get some benefits by what we're doing, that the way we're doing it. I mean, we're consolidating areas, we're consolidating teachers in terms of availability for classrooms, and there are a lot of positives by this, so. All right? There is nothing else on the discussion tonight. So right now, we're planning on going on Tuesday at, say, 7?
Carrie Clark said that it's free.
Okay, so do you want to go early or later? Do you want to go straight there from work and go home, so you're not going home and coming
So
back?
4 o'clock?
Well, some of us don't get off at 4 o'clock. Becky, what time do you get off now? 11?
Yeah.
12?
I'd rather go earlier because then it won't be pitch black and you can see some, I mean,
We can try to go in right, I mean, what, 5 o'clock when, it's dark at 5 o'clock.
it's not dark at 5.
5:47.
No. 6 o'clock sounds like a nice, happy
Let's shoot
meeting,
for 6.
because that's what I wrote down
We have
already.
nothing in the way apparently, so 6 o'clock on Tuesday, and we will post it for meetings to walk and talk.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Everybody bring a drink as you walk, Coke or something. Just don't spill, because I've already cleaned the floors for today. Anything else?
Motions?
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion by Mr. Glovier,
Second.
second by Ms. Douglas. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, we are adjourned at 7:15. Thank you.